2026 is actually a great year at the box office. The summer is heading past $4 billion, the best since 2019. The Odyssey just opened to $264 million worldwide, and a little horror movie called Obsession, made for under $1 million, is sitting at over $400 million. So people are going to theaters. They're just not going to these 12 movies. Let's start with a riddle. What do you get when you cross Henry Cavill, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Guy Ritchie? You get $3 million. That was the opening weekend for In the Gray. $3 million from 2,000 theaters. Guy Ritchie's worst opening in 18 years. And the funny thing is, everyone involved had already run this exact experiment 3 times. Ritchie made The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with Cavill. It flopped. He made The Covenant with Gyllenhaal, $17 million domestic on a $50 million budget. He made Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare with Cavill, $20 million domestic on a $60 million budget. Spy movie, big stars, decent reviews, nobody buys a ticket. That pattern has repeated for 10 freaking years. Ritchie's last actual theatrical hit was Wrath of Man back in 2021. So naturally, they made a fourth one, for $70 million. The movie was shot back in 2023. Then the original studio watched it and went, yeah, no thanks, and it sat on a shelf for 3 years. Finally, a smaller distributor picked it up. They put it out on May 15th with barely any marketing. It opened in 6th place, and after 1 week it fell out of the top 10 entirely. 18 days after the premiere, it was already on streaming. Disney spent $250 million remaking a movie that came out 10 years ago. Which sounds fine until you remember that Moana 2 came out 19 months before this thing. The animated sequel made over $1 billion, and then Disney turned around and asked the same families to pay again for a shot-for-shot copy of a film that's already on Disney+. And they released it right next to Toy Story 5, their own movie, which then beat Moana in Mexico and Brazil. The opening came in at $43 million domestic, $95 worldwide. That's neck and neck with Snow White for the worst remake opening in Disney history. Except Snow White had a year of controversy dragging it down and Moana had none. It had The Rock, a trailer with 182 million views in 24 hours and audiences who genuinely like the movie. 89% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. People loved it. They just didn't come. Then The Odyssey showed up in weekend 2 and basically took every screen in the country. Moana is sitting at around $178 million now, against about $395 million in total costs. Run the numbers, and Disney's real hole from theaters is somewhere around $250 million. Well, at least Moana failed publicly. This one failed so hard that most people never learned it existed. Desert Warrior is a historical epic set in 7th century Arabia. Anthony Mackie plays a legendary bandit, Ben Kingsley plays an emperor. The money came from NBC, the Saudi media giant. It's the most expensive movie ever shot entirely in Saudi Arabia. $150 million. Filming started in 2021. Then everything went wrong. The director walked off the project over creative differences, then came back. The movie sat in post-production for years. Crew members doubted it would ever come out at all. It finally opened in April 2026, 5 years after cameras rolled. Vertical dumped it into 1,000 US theaters with basically zero marketing. Opening weekend, it averaged $483 per screen. That's the worst wide release opening of 2026. The final worldwide total is $742,000 against $150 million. And of that total, the international number is $37,000. Now, the defense you'll hear is that the money wasn't really about the movie. It built film infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, crews, equipment, expertise for future productions. I don't know, maybe, but that just means someone spent $150 million on a movie where the movie itself was optional. And when the movie is optional, this is what you get. For 17 years, nobody wanted to make this movie. Amazon MGM was the last one standing. They put up $200 million, hired Travis Knight to direct, cast Jared Leto as Skeletor. Mattel was clearly hoping for another Barbie. Except it didn't happen. It opened with 29.3 million domestic, 54 million worldwide, and one number from the exit data explains the entire flop. Only 4% of the opening night audience was under 12. They spent $200 million on a toy brand, and the toy-buying demographic didn't show up. The audience was 68% adult men, guys in their 40s who remember the cartoon, and there just aren't enough of them to return $200 million. Second weekend, it collapsed, and it's now sitting at $113.5 million worldwide. Break-even was somewhere around $500 million. And look, the warning signs weren't subtle. 17 years of studios passing on this. A fan base that aged out of it decades ago. A lead villain played by Jared Leto, and his last 3 movies were Morbius, Haunted Mansion, and Tron. All box office bombs. Nobody wanted this movie to happen, and Amazon just paid $200 million to hear it one more time. So Maggie Gyllenhaal walks into Warner Brothers with a pitch. A punk rock feminist retelling of The Bride of Frankenstein. R-rated, set in the 1930s, Christian Bale is the monster, Jessie Buckley is the bride, and the two of them run off together like Bonnie and Clyde. And someone at Warner thought it would be a really cool idea to hand this thing $90 million, plus 65 more in marketing. I honestly wonder if Maggie even asked for that much. This is a $25, maybe $30 million movie by its very nature, and they funded it like a superhero flick. Test screenings flagged the obvious problem early. Nobody could say what this movie actually is. Is it a monster movie, a musical, a feminist thriller? Critics couldn't answer that either, and describing movies is literally their job. Warner saw all of that and just kept going. It opened to $7.3 million, third place behind a Pixar movie and a Scream sequel that was already in its second weekend. C+ cinema score, a 70% drop in weekend 2, dead at $23 million worldwide. Deadline says the loss is around $90 million, and some estimates go way higher. Warner put $170 million into production here, plus another $120 in marketing. And I still don't understand where the confidence came from. The screenwriter had never written a feature. Millie Alcock had never been in a movie. The source material is one of the weakest Supergirl runs ever printed. And the Superman movie this whole thing was building on barely made its money back, if you believe Forbes math. They looked at that pile and projected a $60 to $70 million opening. Based on what, exactly? It opened to 37. Weekend 2 dropped 74%, which is Morbius and Joker 2 territory. By the third Friday, theaters had pulled over 1,000 screens, and it posted the second worst third Friday for any DC movie in 20 years. It's finishing around $120 million worldwide against a break-even of at least $300. Loss estimates go anywhere from $100 to $200 million. And you know what the cherry on top was? The press tour. Before anyone had even seen the movie, Alcock was out there telling Vanity Fair that criticism of this film comes down to people having a problem with women's bodies. And when that blew up, she doubled down. So the final marketing message of a $290 million campaign was basically, if you don't like our movie, you're the problem. Great pitch. Really moved those tickets. The first Greenland came out in 2020. It cost $35 million and made $52 million worldwide, and that was during COVID when it couldn't even get a theatrical release in America and went straight to video. Decent little disaster movie, made its real money on streaming deals. So here's the dumb part. For the sequel, they didn't keep the budget at 35, they didn't bump it to 50, they went straight to $90 million. That's nearly double the entire worldwide gross of the original. Before $1 of marketing, which put the break-even point around $225 million. That's more than 4 times what the first movie made in its whole run. And nothing about the first movie justified that. The sequel itself was fine, by the way. Mixed reviews, lead actors got praised, and it opened in January with basically nothing to compete against. But it didn't matter. It did about $10 million domestic in its first week, theaters pulled over 800 screens within 18 days, and it finished at $45 million worldwide. which is less than the original made during a pandemic. Andy Serkis spent 15 years trying to make Animal Farm. He got attached back in 2011. It was supposed to shoot all the way back in 2014. Netflix bought it in 2018, then dropped it. It finally landed at Angel Studios, the faith-based distributor behind Sound of Freedom. On paper, this should work. Animal Farm is one of the most famous books ever written. Every person on the planet got forced to read it in school. You could actually sell this. But then somebody on that production made two big decisions. Decision 1, let's make it a children's comedy with fart jokes. And Decision 2, let's flip the message. Orwell wrote the anti-communist satire. The movie makes the villain a billionaire. So let's do a quick head count of who's left to buy a ticket. Kids can't follow it. It's too heady for children and too thin for adults. Conservatives were furious that the famous anti-communist book got its message reversed, and regular critics hated it anyway. It's sitting at 27% on Rotten Tomatoes with a C- cinema score. There's this quote from Serkis in Variety where he says he wanted the movie to create a debate, and in his words, boy did they get a debate. What they didn't get was an audience. It opened to 3.4 million on 2,600 screens, behind The Devil Wears Prada 2, behind Michael, behind Mario Galaxy, and even behind Hokum, a tiny indie horror movie. The final number is 5.7 million on a 35 million budget. 15 years of work, 1/6 of the budget back. Robin Hood is cursed. Russell Crowe did a big serious Robin Hood in 2010 and it underperformed. Taron Egerton did a reboot in 2018 and it was one of the biggest bombs of that year. Every few years, somebody in Hollywood decides they'll be the one who finally cracks Robin Hood, and every time, people stay home. So obviously, someone made another one. Michael Sarnowski, the guy who directed A Quiet Place Day 1, wrote a dark, violent movie about Robin Hood dying. Hugh Jackman as an old outlaw rotting away in exile. Sounds fun, right? The budget was $20 million. And then they released it on June 19th. The same day Toy Story 5 opened to $160 million. An R-rated period piece about death and guilt up against the biggest family movie of the year. The marketing was non-existent. They even held the premiere during the NBA Finals when nobody was paying attention. Opening Friday, the per-screen average was $631. That's maybe 40 tickets per theater per day. The whole opening weekend came to 2.9 million, and the total run topped out around 6. For Hugh Jackman, that's his worst wide opening in almost 20 years. Break-even was around 45 million. They made 6. This one's actually a good movie. It's got 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh, and the cast is ridiculous. You've got Chris Hemsworth playing a jewel thief. You've got Mark Ruffalo playing the detective who's hunting him. And then you've got Halle Berry, Nick Nolte, and Jennifer Jason Leigh on top of that. If you showed me this poster in 2013, I'd assume the movie made $400 million. Instead, it opened to 15. It came in third that weekend. It lost to Wuthering Heights, and then it also lost to A Cartoon Goat. The movie finished at $72.9 million worldwide, and it cost $90 to make. A $15 million opening is completely normal for this kind of movie. The Beekeeper opened to 15. Den of Thieves sequel opened to 15. A Working Man opened to 15. That is just what dad thrillers do. And they still make money because they usually cost around 40. So somebody at Amazon looked at a genre where you spend 40 million and they decided to spend 90. On what, exactly? This movie is guys talking in cars, and then there's one jewel heist. Where did the other 50 million go? Did Hemsworth eat it? And after all that, they released it on Valentine's weekend, so it had to fight a date movie and a kids movie at the same time. Chris Pratt plays a detective named Chris. He's accused of murdering his wife, and he has 90 minutes to convince an AI judge he didn't do it. Timur Bekmambetov directed it for Amazon, and somebody over there decided this pitch was worth $60 million. Now, funny thing, it actually opened at number 1. It made 11 million, and it finally knocked Avatar: Fire and Ash off the top spot after 5 straight weeks, and it did all of that during a monster winter storm. Theaters were closed across 37 states that weekend. So I can picture someone at Amazon going, "See, it's the snow, the movie's fine." Except the rest of the planet didn't have a snowstorm, and the movie made 11.5 million from 80 international markets. The snow was not the problem. Critics gave it 24%. Regular people liked it fine, 81% audience score, but nobody was actually going. Final worldwide number was 54.7 million, and the budget alone was 60. Add marketing, and this needed somewhere around 120 to 150 to break even. It got a third of the way there. And then May arrived, and Disney basically said, "Amateurs, watch this. The Mandalorian and Grogu." It opened to 98 million over Memorial Day. That's less than Solo made on the same weekend 8 years ago, and Solo was the flop that froze Star Wars movies for 7 years. So that opening was the good news. Because the second weekend dropped 69%. The third weekend dropped another 59%, and the movie fell out of the domestic top 5. And then things got properly embarrassing. Obsession passed it at the domestic box office. That's a horror movie that cost $750 grand to make. Then Backrooms passed it too, and that one cost $10 million. So a $165 million Star Wars movie got lapped by 2 indie horror flicks in one summer. The movie finished at $344.8 million worldwide. It needed 500 to 600 to break even. The losses run north of 100 million. And the dumbest part was baked in before they shot a single frame because this was never written as a movie. It started life as the script for Mandalorian Season 4. So somebody at Disney looked at a TV show and that somebody went, "Let's staple the season together, buy a Super Bowl ad, and charge $15 a seat." And people reacted exactly how you'd think.